We're going to get started here. My name is Brian Ouimette. I'm with Proofgeist. Thank you for joining the session on UncURLed, OAuth and APIs. We're going to go ahead and take a quick poll around the room. Who has experience with OAuth or APIs? And how many of you have actually successfully done OAuth? How many of you have banged your head on the walls trying to figure out the documentation on OAuth?
Yeah.
That was me about 4 or 5 years ago, trying to do Google OAuth. I spent 3 weeks just in the docs trying to figure out how it worked, understand it, and it was painful. Even once you started to get the concept, then you were running into errors that you didn't understand while going through the process. So the goal here for this presentation is to show a tool that I built to help take all that pain away. Part of it's an add-on and part of it's a code generator that will go ahead and allow you to walk through OAuth documentation and actually generate the code to get your access tokens. How many of you do not know what OAuth is? So I'm going to give a little analogy that I saw while preparing the presentation. We can think of OAuth kind of like checking into a hotel. So what do you do when you go to check into a hotel, when you walk through the door?
Driver's license.
So your first step is you walk up to the desk, and they're going to ask who you are and for your ID. That's the kind of the first step that happens in OAuth. They want to know who you are. Then generally they're going to make you sign something, take your credit card. That's the second step where basically we'll get deeper into it later, but we're going to get a code from the hotel. In this case, it's going to be a paper we have to sign. We're going to turn it back over, and then they're going to hand us an access key that gives us access to our room, the pool. It doesn't give us access to everything, it just gives us access to what we're accessing. So OAuth in that way is very similar, where you have scoped access to certain resources. So what is OAuth 2? It's an industry standard protocol for users to authorize access from one service to another. So you've probably seen it a lot. Sign in with Google, sign up with Google. That's using an OAuth workflow where you click sign in with Google, then you're prompted to give access on whatever they're requesting. Sometimes it's name and email, sometimes it's full access to all of your data. Usually it's scoped, so there's certain things that they allow you to, or they want access to, and we'll show how that gets defined. But again, OAuth 2, what I want to show is how we get to this point where you sign in, prompted, you authorize, get a code back, and then get an access token to actually perform some function. Later in the session, after the OAuth, we're actually going to go into an API framework that I built. It's just a methodology that I use. And what we're going to do is take a look at how it's set up. It has all the endpoints for OpenAI, so you guys will have access to that and see how we go ahead and maybe generate an image just using the framework. All right, so try to simplify OAuth 2. It's 3 basic steps. The first step is generating a URL that you're going to send the user to. Before all of that, you have to set up an OAuth app. We'll get into that. But what we're going to do is we're going to send the user somewhere so they can go ahead and authenticate and then authorize that service to have access to their data. The user is then redirected to a hosted page of some sort where that code will be embedded in a query parameter in the URL we'll send you back to. That code gets extracted, and then we'll make an API call to request access tokens. And then we can take that access token and use it to access endpoints that we're authorized to based on the scope of that access. The first step that we've got to do when we're working with OAuth with a service is we're going to go into usually a developer portal, and we're going to set up what they call an OAuth app. And in there, we're going to define where that redirect happens, so wherever that page is hosted. They're going to give us some information too. They're going to give us a client ID and secret, which we'll use subsequent calls. And then we will also set up, if the service allows, or the scopes that authorization will allow. So if we can create one OAuth app for a service that only allows access to very basic information. We can have another one that's set up for different users that can have full access to anything. So there's some flexibility there. In the example that I'm going to show, however, the OAuth app generation is actually within the application that we're using, and that application is Front. It's a email service on steroids. We use it for internal communications on emails. So we can track it in line with the emails, and then we can trigger actions and things. So the redirect, why do we need this? So once they've authorized the service, they need some way to get information back to us, so then we can go ahead and actually start using OAuth. So with that redirect, we personally use GitHub Pages. We have it hosted, and we use it in a web viewer where when we trigger the OAuth process, the card window pops up, the web viewer appears, and actually let me go back. So web viewer pulls up, and it's going to go to the URL for authorizing. And then when it's done the redirect. It's going to go ahead and extract the code, and then it's going to use the JavaScript functions to call FileMaker to go ahead and send that code and call a script. And the way I'm doing that is using the state parameter, which is a parameter that you can use on the authorized request. Anything that you want to specify. In my case, I'm sending a block of JSON that has a script and some other details that I need in order to allow this transaction. It comes back. I know how to parse it, call the script, continue the OAuth process in all one step. So usually we'll put like a button on a layout they want to authorize to the service. Go ahead, pop the card window, they'll authorize, redirect, and then go ahead, close the card window, and the access gets stored. So the basic components of the authorization request are going to be the authorization URL. And then we'll look at the docs here in a minute. You're going to be able to see what parameters they take. Each service is different, and then each workflow. So there's different workflows in OAuth. There's user-based, and then there's kind of server or client-based. We're going to focus on the user-based workflows here.
But it doesn't have an Express app.
And then we'll look through the docs, and you'll be able to see what parameters that they require. So if we're looking here, we can see that the URL is built with the authorize endpoint, and then we're just attaching the client ID, the state parameter, our redirect URI where the user is going to be redirected, and then the response code as parameters to the URL. That's going to get loaded into our web viewer, and the user's going to authenticate and authorize. And when they're redirected, you can see on the bottom here that there's code equals. That's going to be something that's gets sent back from the service. The state parameter as well, which is what we sent up above. And that allows us to know what script we're calling and some additional. Next, when that script gets called, again, there's going to be a URL that we have to hit, but these are API calls. And this will all be handled through the code generator. But the basic pieces of that, we've got the URL we're going to hit. We've got authentication that we need to do in the form of a header, which is going to be the client ID and client secret, base64 encoded. And then we're going to pass back the code, the redirect URI, and the grant type. And the grant type just refers to the type of workflow that we're using. In this case, it's authorization code. We got back a code. And then finally, after we get our access tokens back, these tokens expire. Usually it's an hour, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. So if we want to make subsequent calls without having to have the user go back and reauthorize the app, we use what's called a refresh token. And basically, we're just going to pass back that refresh token through an API call, and then they'll just generate new access tokens that will allow us to use the API as they. Any questions so far? All right, so again, this code generator is designed for the user-based workflows, so the auth code workflow and implicit workflows. It does require base elements for copying the code from the generator over to your file. And then there's one piece within the code generator I'll show you where to define what file you're putting that code into, because it ties with the state. Here.
One moment, guys. Let's see what we're going to. Does that say external?
And then
Yeah, extended.
That word? You want a mirror. How's that, guys? You see it?
Yeah.
Good? Thanks. I'm tech support.
All right, so first I'm going to show you the documentation for Slack, which was what I included on here. Show why it can be confusing if somebody new to learn this. They give you some good graphics at the beginning to kind of explain what's going on, but if you've never used it, it's only so useful. And then you can see here we're sending users to authorize or install, and it gives you some stuff, but it doesn't tell you how to format that. It just says we need these pieces of information. If you're never doing it, you're not really sure where to go with it. And then there's a bunch of information that you're just looking through and like, where do I start? So I'm going to go ahead and skip this and we'll go for the OAuth for front. And we can see here the first step is to request authorization, and they actually show you how to build a new app. And they tell you that what you need and where you're going to do it. So you can see here we've got response type of code, and it must be set to code. We've got a client ID, a redirect URI, and our state. And then we can see the next step is to get an authorization code. Once we're redirected, they show you here where the authorization code is, as well as the state. So those are things that you would parse out. In this case, I'm parsing it out using JavaScript in the web viewer, and then I'm going ahead and calling FileMaker back with what we need. So we can see here, the get authorization code is just talking about where that's located. Step 2 is we're going to exchange that authorization code, and it talks about how we do that. So we need to make a basic authentication request, and then it tells us we take our client ID and our client secret, put them together, and then we're going to base64 encode it, and then we'll go ahead and use an authorization header with that to go ahead and authorize a request, along with our code, our redirect URI, and our grant type. And those are going to get sent as data, and I'll show you that. And then finally, we're going to read the code. Dive right into the code generator now. Search here. All this front. Create a new file called integrations. And then before we get there, I'm going to open up front because we need to build our OAuth app to get our client ID secret. Like I said before, in general, this is usually a web portal. It's a developer portal where you get that information. In this case, we are actually going to do it here through the app. So their developer portal is built right in. I'm going to go ahead and create an app. I'm just going to give it a name. Description. We'll go ahead and create. And we can see here that it's given us information here. We've got an app secret. We're going to go ahead and go to the OAuth section. We've got a client ID and client secret here. And go ahead.
Excuse me, where's the app being created?
This is within the front system or whatever system that you're trying to access.
Yeah, but I knew it was a Google Workspace. So.
Yeah. But yeah, so for Google, it'd be Google Workspace.
Right.
Azure is fun. They've got it buried within their thing.
Is this where you do like the Auto FMS tools to create one locally on a server, a FileMaker server, or
No.
for creating the webhooks there?
No, that's for webhooks, which is different.
It's webhook, okay.
Yep.
Oh,
Got a typo.
Oh gosh.
Missing an F.
You missed the F.
You guys, thank you.
there we go.
Space.
It's just watching.
So we've got to put where we're redirecting them into the app so they know where to send them. Go ahead and do the request. Copy both our client ID and secret. And back into FileMaker. Yes. So I'm going to paste my client ID in here, and I'm going to do the same for our secret. And then I'm going to go to the front documentation and see what they required. So we'll go to there now. Come back and see if we go here. We've got a response type, client ID, a redirect URI, and a state. And what I've done is I've tried a bunch of services and tried to get all of those in here that I could. So you can just select them in response type, which had to be code, the client ID, which that'll pull in automatically. We don't get state, and then we get the redirect. Go ahead and go into front real quick and grab that.
Where do you get state from?
So state is I automatically generate. So
Just because you've done this integration with front before, you like how?
no, so this is yeah. So in that state parameter, it's not specific to front. So the state parameter is specific to the file name, and then within the code generator, everything else is namespaced. So like the service name is front, and the scripts will generate with that name, and then just call script by name. So it all gets parsed out. So let me go ahead and fix this here, and then we'll get that authorization URL, which is and then for the exchange, we're going to go ahead and look at the docs. And we can see that the exchange requires authentication. So we're going to go ahead and switch that to yes. We don't have to do anything else. We know if they require authentication, that it's going to be client ID and secret together. And then it's going to go ahead and just put that into the request. We'll go ahead and grab the exchange URL. And then we'll come back and we'll see the require code. We already know that code is going to be coming back for many of these endpoints. So code is not in the list for you to select, nor could you define it because each time it'll be different. So that's handled for you. So all we need to do is take the redirect URI and the grant type. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll pick grant type here and redirect URI. Go ahead and paste. Grant type is authorization code that was in the documentation there. Yep. I cannot type. Let's see. Good authorization code and redirect URI. We also have the ability to do refresh, which it showed here at the bottom of the documentation. Going to go ahead and grab as well. We can see there that the URL that we're using, that we need to pass a refresh token in. This again, we won't have because it changes each time. So the way the code's written, it knows where to grab that from, and it'll put that into the request. And then the grant type needs to be refresh token, so we'll go ahead and do that. That also requires an authorization header. Now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and copy our scripts to the clipboard, which may not have worked because they don't install base elements. But I can open it up in my other version of FileMaker and you can grab them there. Let me go ahead and create a new file first and we'll see if it did work. If it didn't, we do that. This is a step we need to put the two add-ons in here. First one is going to be the OAuth, PG OAuth. This is our code generator, and then we're going to go ahead it looks like we have a bug with. I'm going to switch versions of FileMaker and we'll see if this. Integrations. We're going to go ahead and add the two add-ons. All right, there we go. First add-on we need, and then I also have one for logging, which we're going to go ahead and add here. I use API logging for everything. I'll put some caveats in there. I also have very regimented schedules to clear the logs. So we're not storing a ton of information about the requests that we don't need. But I like being able to go back when a user says, hey, I did this request 2 days ago and it's not showing up in this other system. I can then go back and look for that request and say, okay, I see you did it and it says that it was successful. So it gives you an area to start debugging. And then if there's errors, then you have those tracked as well. You can quickly look at that. Let's see if we open up the code generator. I'm going to have to copy the scripts from here. Previous. Get my scripts. Paste those in. You can see the only script that has a check mark next to it is the authorize front. And that is the script you're going to call whether you put it in a button or we just call it here live, which is what I'm going to do. So here we can see the login screen. Pull up my data viewer so you can see there's no access tokens or anything stored. What I've done for this tool is when it gets the access tokens, it's just going to store them as globals. What you're going to do is different. Usually you're going to store it per user on the user table to make this easy for people to at least understand the concept, be able to see it. We're just going to store it as a global. So there's some tweaking to do after, but at least it gets you started. So this is the authorize step, that first step in the.
Didn't save it on the website.
Try that again. And these are the errors you'd run into when you're first starting out. You're like, what is that Why is this not working?
What the hell?
All right, so now that I've already logged in, this is the authorized step. I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, we want access to shared inbox, teammates, and company information. And see that it's also saying we want read-write access to the inboxes, and then we just want read-only information for the company only. And then it tells us what we don't have access to. So for scoped applications, it'll tell you what you're getting, and a lot of times it'll tell you what you're not having access to. We'll go ahead and hit authorize here.
Probably a typo somewhere.
Yeah, I'm looking. Hold on.
Hey, Brian, I think it's the file name for the FileMaker app. It says integrations instead of integrations.
But it said it in places.
That way the other one too, though.
Integrations here.
My life. It's not just you. This is like.
Try this again. Go ahead and try to authorize. Still not. Good end. Good thing is I have another file here that I can show you. Documents, and we'll go ahead and I believe I have a whole library here of ones that we can take a look at. So, look Google. See that Google has a lot more things, including the scope that we're going to use. It does not require authentication, and it has other things that we use here as well. Refresh. So I'll go ahead and get the code for this instead. Before I do that, pull the state out and then regenerate the state. I've got a state there. Go ahead and get my scripts. Go back to our file, which is front. That one work. And we'll see it work with Google. This is just gonna be full of technical difficulties.
Awesome.
I feel so much better now. You did that just for me, right? This is me. All right, let's see if we can. All right, so this is saying what we have access to. So I want access to calendars, including the ability to, or email and calendars, ability to view and edit, or read, compose, send, and delete. I'm gonna hit allow. Cross your fingers. This one's easy to fix. So we moved the page. I'm gonna come in here. Did not update that. That's not gonna work either, but I can show you how to fix that real quick. So Google requires the redirect URI in all your calls that you make. And I can show you a common error that you'll run into because you don't have this defined properly between your code and what the service is expecting. Run into it a lot with Google. This again so we can see that error. So the redirect doesn't match. So that's what that means. We get a mismatch, doesn't match. So we can go ahead real quick. Let us go to the developer console. This is more valuable than if everything worked.
Yeah.
Exactly what I was thinking, right there.
Absolutely, this one.
It just sticks.
Here.
It's not you, trust me.
Go ahead and go to credentials here. This is the one I was using. This is our OAuth app. And we can see that the redirect URI that's specified here does not match what we had before. This. I'm also going to
Secret is
copy that.
unlocking this.
We're going to save this. I'll come back to my settings here. So the code generator, we can see, took all of the inputs that we had and put them into the settings here. So let's go ahead and place what's here. In all three places. Right. Sign in. Going to allow. That might be a typo on my part. So, GitHub. And actually what we're going to do here,
That's the URL.
no, we're just going to replace it in the redirect here. We're going to go ahead and regenerate the code. What makes this nice is we can just go ahead here. We can delete that whole thing. Paste a new one. Settings are in there. And the redirect is not. Let's look. And here, it's because we've got use.com instead of .io. Save. And this time it should work. We're rooting for you. And allow. I've got a good feeling. We can see what we have an access token, when it expires, and the refresh token. This should have been easier, but this is the whole point of why OAuth is difficult. This tool, so I can just drop the code, change some settings, back throw it in, and try again.
You send to refresh token an hour?
Yeah, so what I usually do, and some people are different, some people will just go ahead. Let's actually take a poll on this one. Be interested to see. How many of you refresh your token when you know it's about time to expire versus make the call, let it fail, and then refresh your token?
The latter.
I usually will use the method, I take about 30 seconds off from when it's supposed to expire, and I just refresh it.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Instead of having a failed call and then having to put in a loop or something to deal with it, I'd rather just refresh it when I know it needs to be done, and then go ahead.
So I'm using QuickBooks a lot, and somebody the program at this point server that I submit the QuickBooks request to, and it passes on to QuickBooks and gives me the data back. But importantly, if it finds a token that's expired, it gets me a new one automatically and stores it on the server. So I don't worry about it.
Yep. Go ahead.
Well, I was kind of curious because you had two add-ons, PG OAuth and a log, API log.
Yeah, so the
Tell us that.
I think you probably saw it, and you can kind of see it here. I think at the last minute, I put the logging into the OAuth module as well. But I always will drag in the logging for myself in any file I'm working in with APIs. I like having that access, being able to debug. One of the things that I'll show you, and we can actually probably see here. Yeah, because on the auth piece, I don't store that stuff just because it has all your information in there. But we'll go ahead and move over to the OpenAI file. I'm going to skip the slides. They're just overview slides anyways. We don't have a ton of time, so I think it'd be better just to spend it in code. Password here is admin.
Second.
I'm gonna go ahead and delete this image. What I'll show you first is that API request log. You can see I've done a few here. What makes this so powerful is I can see everything that went into the API request. So I can see the data that I sent, any of the headers that were sent or requested to be sent, the method that we're using. These options here are for tracking how long the call took and a trace route, which we can see here. So we can see what OpenAI sent to us. It's probably.
So all these layouts and everything came when you dragged on the add-on?
Yeah, so when you drag on the add-on, you're going to get the API request log, and you'll get the web viewer card window. So let's talk a little bit about how I approach APIs and what this framework does. I can tell you that just in the past year, I've deployed 500 to 600 endpoints for our hosting infrastructure and internal teams. And the only way that I can keep my sanity is to have everything lined up, all consistent through all our platforms. And I will show you the basics of how that's done, why I do it. So we have an HTTP module. This was built by Todd Geist. I've been using it for years, even before I knew Todd. And basically, what this does is this takes the whole API request as a JSON representation. So you put in what your headers are supposed to be, what your query parameters are supposed to be, what type of method, the URL. All of that will go into a JSON representation. It gets passed to the script. It gets parsed out. The API call is executed, and then we get the result back along with any other information. Again, I've got my logging module in here. Then I'll start kind of from the hierarchy. So we go, basically we've got a button on a layout that we want to do something. In this case, it's going to be for image generation using OpenAI. So we've got some parameters here that we need and are required for that call. Some of them are hard-coded. One of them is actually a prompt from the layout, which we'll see here in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and take that and create the request body that we're going to send over to our public script for generating the image. And the public scripts are used to define everything that's specific for that endpoint, not for the whole service. So if we go down to generate image, I would start off with error capture, validating parameters that I expect to see in here. So in this case, I need a prompt in order to get an image back. That's required. You can see up here what is required as well. That way, when I come into a script, I already know what's required. I can make sure it's doing that. Then we go ahead and actually parse out those parameters, and then we're going to go ahead and build what I call request JSON. And what that is that representation. So I initialize it with method, URL, headers, query, and options. And then we'll go ahead and define the method. Headers get put in as headers dot whatever the header name is, and then the value. It's the same for query parameters. And in the case of OpenAI, I only want to send the values that are required or that are actually passed in. So I've gone ahead and broken those out into only setting them if they're actually there. I define my endpoint. I define the expected status code that I expect to get back from this. That gets bundled up gets passed over to a wrapper script for that HTTP script. And what this script is designed to do is finish building the request. So I'm going to go to a settings script. So we'll parse out what we've got passed in. If I want to do logging, it's here. So it's defined per service, whether you want logging on or off. I'm doing call script by name. So this can be switched out with any type of logging that you might have. Go ahead and we'll go to the API settings, and here's where I store our base URL and then any tokens or anything that we need. I'll also use this as a way to branch for production versus sandbox environments. So I can have all my credentials in one spot and then just pass in a parameter to say, give me one or the other. We come back here, and then that's where it's going to go ahead and either put in our token, or we'll pass in an access token here to go ahead and make the request. So finish building the request, get sent off to the HTTP script, and then we'll get a response back, get a code back, which is the HTTP status code, and then we'll do logging. It'll check to see if the code matched. If it did, it'll send back saying that there was no error, and it'll parse out the body so we have it. Otherwise, it's going to come back with a failure message. That's about it. So we'll go ahead and back to images here. We've got a prompt here that was done by Ernest in his session that he didn't get to, where we're just going to have it generate an image based on the prompt here as well as the name of the topic here. I'll go ahead and hit generate image. It's going to take up to a minute.
Do you log everything in the file or
Yeah, it gets logged directly in the file.
in the file?
Yep. So it gets logged right into that API request log table. And we'll see here that creates an image, the title. And then if we go back, we can actually go to the request log. We can see what it generated. We asked for base 64 back, so then we could just decode it and set it in the field. And we can see what we sent for the request. And if for some reason we didn't like it, we could maybe fix one of the parameters that we have in here and then just hit the retry button. Or we can go back to images and fix something else. We can generate it again and we should get a new image.
What does image edit do?
So then you can pass a prompt, some information to edit that image. So it'll take the image that you have and then it'll edit it. Instead of just generating a new
A
image.
new
based
one,
on-
oh, you just change a few things
Yeah.
in that.
Any questions?
Image
Yeah.
variations, what does that do?
I think it gives you different variations for that image. So it's another endpoint that OpenAI is there that you can use to get different variations. But if
I have two questions. One, I downloaded your generator from your sample, from your, the session, and there weren't like any existing APIs, like a library of existing APIs that you've solved, like which parameters and stuff pre-built, like you have in your generator.
well, that was for me for testing. I mean, I could release those.
Helpful.
If you had,
I mean, I have them. I can just pull out all the
Right.
the values and the.
Yeah.
that was my second question. Can I have all your
No,
secret?
you can. Any other questions?
That was awesome.
Thank you.